Hello, friends. How's it going? It's Michael Parker, and welcome back to Michael Parker Media. It's been a couple of weeks, and I'm glad to be back. Today, as we do this recording, it is the summer solstice. It is the longest day of the year here in North America, which is kind of interesting. Just thought I'd bring that up. Today, speaking of long days, we're going to speak to a man who had some himself. He was a contractor for Blackwater in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, approximately 18 months. He's going to tell us what that life was like. Our guest today is Morgan Lerette. He is the author of the book, Guns, Girls, and Greed. I was a Blackwater mercenary in Iraq. And some of you might be thinking, Blackwater, I remember that name. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
I've been reading the book, and the first thing I've got to say about Blackwater is, before we even talk about what Blackwater was as a private military contractor, I got to say they gave it a pretty good name, because that's a really kind of malevolent name. And when you hear Blackwater, anything that's got black at the beginning of it, Black Sabbath, Black Rock, Black Metal, Blackwater. I mean, it basically tells you straight up, this is going to be heavy. So tell us exactly what Blackwater was, because it no longer exists in that name now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was actually marketing genius that it was Blackwater. And it was because it's in Moyock, North Carolina. And if you've never been to Moyock, North Carolina, don't go. It's a dump. But there was all these swamps, and they were walking around these swamps, and it was like staining their calves black because the water was so gross. And that's literally why they called it Blackwater. And then they did the bear paw with it looks like you're looking through the sights of a weapon. Eric Prince will tell you it was completely accidental, but they did start as a shooting range. So Eric Prince, former Navy SEAL, realized that it's such a huge pain in the butt to get on a range when you're in the military. And I can testify to this, it really is. So he decided he was going to buy this land outside of Virginia Beach, so where all the Navy people are, and he was going to start setting up ranges so where they could come and they could start shooting. So that's really where it started. And then after Columbine, they started getting into some of the training stuff of like active shooter training. And then the wars kicked off. And everybody asked me, was Blackwater good or Blackwater bad? Well, Blackwater was, because what happened was when the wars kicked off, they had all these people that needed to be protected. And Blackwater came in and said, hey, I know a whole bunch of people, former Navy SEALs, knuckle draggers like me. I can get these guys to go in and start protecting diplomats over in Iraq. So that's really how it started, is a big contract came down. Blackwater said, I can get the guys trained, I can get them on the ground, I have the facilities, let's do this. So it was it was born because there was a need for it.
So Eric Prinz and I believe his partner was Alan Clark. Were they both former Navy SEALs?
I don't remember if they were both Navy SEALs, but I wouldn't be shocked, because it's like the SEAL. That's like the SEAL private military contractor. Triple Canopy, which is actually the company that Blackwater sold out to, is more special forces guys. So everybody's kind of got their little niche.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was thinking back on the War on Terror, and I would hear about Blackwater, and I was unclear exactly what Blackwater was doing. And I think a lot of people might have been under the conception that I had, which was that maybe you guys did a lot of different things, but you actually were hired to do a certain thing. What was that?
Yeah, so we were hired to protect diplomats in Iraq. So the State Department had a security service, but it was very small, and none of those guys had combat training. So when they injected the State Department, the CIA, the NSA, all those intelligence agencies, they realized that you can't just send those guys out there in an active combat zone without some kind of protection. So Blackwater came in and said, hey, I know Morgan. Morgan can go over there and he can protect those guys going in and out of an active combat zone. I mean, think about that. Before the war, the global war on terror, you didn't have the State Department, driving around at the front lines of Vietnam. You didn't have it in World War II. So this was just a brand new paradigm that we kind of accidentally fell into.
You have mentioned that since you wrote your book, some of your former compatriots, they did not like the fact that you put this book out, and they took umbrage with the fact that you used the word mercenary in the title. Okay, so I want you to explain to me, if that's not the correct word, then why is it the correct word?
All right, so the Butthurt Brigade, as they have been affectionately been called, didn't like it that I put the book out because they think that it showed Blackwater in a negative light, which is kind of funny because Blackwater kind of showed itself in a negative light anyway.
That's
But
the way I remember it.
yeah, so I say mercenary because I could have went back over there as an Air Force guy, as an Army guy, could have raised my right hand and went over there for, 50, 60, $70,000. The reason why I went to work for Blackwater, and if anybody looks themselves in the mirror, the reason why they went is because of the money, right?
Mhm.
$550 a day is a very it's a catalyst to make you want to go and risk your life because it's enough money to do that. So, I mean, technically, by the definition of mercenary, we weren't because we were employed by the U.S. government. But at the same time, we were over there for the money, not the mission. We weren't actually part of the State Department. We were subcontractors for Blackwater, which was a contract for the State Department. It's very convoluted, but at the end of the day, we went there for money and for the adventure.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about how you got there because I believe that you started off in the Air National Guard.
Yeah, I was like the poster child for recruiters back in 1999, right? Nobody wanted to join the military, so they went to these small towns, poor kids. That was me. And the recruiters were just licking their lips. So
Mhm.
I talked to the Marine Corps recruiter, the Army recruiter, and then finally my grandfather, a World War II guy, said, if you're going to go in, you should join the Air Force because they have the best food. And
Hmm.
I was like, well, hey, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Get me out of small town USA, join the Air National Guard 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. They're going to pay my college. Man, I'm going to be living the dream. And then September 11th happened, and my pager went off. So, depending on how old your audience is, the pager went off and told me, hey, get your butt down to this base. We're in DEFCON 4, which is Defense Condition 4, meaning the US is under attack.
Yeah.
So after September 11th, we got activated for 2 years. Young single male. I volunteered for everything. I went to Oman and then Jordan and then Kuwait and
18,
Iraq.
19 years old. How are you? How old are you at this point when
Uh,
you go over?
I was 20 years old when I got activated. By the time I did my first deployment, I had just turned 21.
Okay.
And then the National Guard brings in all kinds of people. So it brought in these Force Recon Marines. We were activated. I made good friends with them. And they said, hey, I'm going to go work for Blackwater. And I'm 23 at the time. Blackwater, everybody remembers Blackwater for the Fallujah incident, March
Yes.
2003. Four Blackwater contractors get hanged off a bridge. I thought he was insane. Like there was no way I was going to go work for Blackwater. But he started working for Blackwater, put in a good word for me. I got a call the next day. They said, come work for Blackwater. And I said, I'm not really into it. And they said, how about for $550 a day? And I said, sign me up. Let's go.
Yep.
So it really, I wish I could say I had this master plan, but it just kind of fell into my lap and I went with it.
As a young man, I get that. And so one thing when I was reading the book, I was wondering about, and this may seem like a dumb question, but it crossed my mind. So the $550 a day, is that 5 days a week or 7 days a week? How does that work?
7 days a week.
Yeah.
So
That's what I
it
thought.
doesn't matter. Sometimes we would have 3, 4 days off. You still get paid. And some
Mhm.
days we would do 3, 4 runs in a day. You still get the same amount of money. It doesn't matter how dangerous it was.
So let's talk about your preparation. So this guy calls you up from Blackwater and he wants you to jump on board. You're hesitant, but you end up doing it. So how long from that call till training and then to Iraq? And what is training like?
They would have flown me out the next day, but I was in college and I think I had a week and a half left in my summer classes because this was June '04.
Mhm.
And I told them, hey, just let me finish up these college classes. And the guy said, really? You give a crap about college when you can start making money? And I was like, come on, man, it's a week and a half.
Yeah.
So a week and a half later, I'm on a flight and then we just start the training process. Now, day one is like a PT test, right? Physical fitness test. Mile and a half run, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups. You do a dummy drag with this big dummy, that you see in like the wrestling dummies. You drag that around, and then if you passed, you were on to the next phase. Next phase was shooting. Now, I would love to sit here and say it was like this really cool thing that you see in the movies, but it was just like any military range, right? You take your M4 out there, you shoot at 300 meters, 250, 200, all the way up to 50 meters. If you pass that, you get the pistol, you do your fully automatic, your shotgun, your AK-47. I mean, really within the first 3 to 4 days. It's just weeding out the people that weren't fit enough or couldn't shoot. And then
And
after
let me ask
that,
you, was
go
there
ahead.
a lot of those people? Because I'm imagining right now we're in the aggregating. We need people, so we're going to cut you some slack.
No, there was no cutting slack.
Oh, okay.
I'll give it that. So if you failed once on the range, they would give you a second shot. I remember this guy was laying down on the range at 300 meters and he kept missing his target. And he was like, no, my gun's not zeroed. And this guy hops down behind it, shoots it right into the target 3 times and says, your gun's fine. And then that guy didn't make it. So it was really actually pretty quick. If there was some point where you either couldn't get a security clearance or you couldn't shoot or you didn't pass your PT test, you were out. So we started with, somewhere around 40 and probably graduated somewhere around 22, 23.
Hmm. Let's talk about the security clearance, because this is another thing I was unclear about in the book. And one of your buddies, it seemed like he joined before you, but he was still trying to get his security clearance. And talk about what constituted the security clearance.
Yeah, so that's my buddy Tony in the book.
Yeah.
And look, anybody that's going to work for Blackwater probably hasn't made the best life decisions up to that point, right? So there was a lot of people that were in debt, just mountains of debt, didn't pay the IRS, didn't pay their credit card bills. And if you've ever done a security clearance, that's the first thing that's going to kill you. Because the theory is if you owe $100,000 in credit card debt, then somebody can come in and pay that off, and then you would
Yeah.
become a spy for them. So that was the vast majority of the people not getting a clearance. And then some people, couldn't figure out where they were from 2001 to 2002. Some people had felonies that they didn't mention on their job application. So, I mean, there was just days you come in, somebody, we're in this little trailer. Somebody walks in and says, I'm looking for, names 3 people. You never see them again. They're just gone. Could have been a security clearance, could have been anything. Who the heck knows? But that really, I was 23, all-American boy, hadn't smoked pot since high school. For me, it was actually really, really fast. But a lot of people just got stuck on that security clearance phase for weeks at a time.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like from the book, because I think your buddy that you were talking about, Tony, it seemed like he was the one that got you in, but he didn't get his full security clearance.
I don't think he ever did. He hadn't actually paid his taxes since like 1996. is kind of what he told me later. But yeah, he never made it. So what they did is they put him on a contract for the Department of Defense where he didn't need to have a clearance. So you have cleared contracts and non-cleared.
Mhm.
So he had one of those ones where you didn't have to get a clearance, which meant he couldn't get a hold of like secret information if it came down the pipe. But still, those guys actually made $600 a day. So maybe I'm the sucker, huh?
Why would they make more with less of a security clearance?
It just depends on the contract, right? So the Department of Defense pays X, Department of State pays Y. If you get
Gotcha.
into the really cool contracts, the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, they pay something different. So it really just depends on the contracts you've got. I remember getting approached by my buddy Tony, and he's like, dude, we can run diamonds in Africa and it's $1,100 a day. And I was like, okay, even that's too crazy for me. We're not going to do it. So it just depends on what they're going to pay, right?
Right, right. All right. So you get in, you pass a security test. Now they're going to fly you to Iraq, and you meet some really colorful characters over there. And I don't want to give away too much of the book, but just tell people, once you got there and you're in the green zone, you talk about Saddam's uh,
Palace.
his palace, which is an anachronistic term, but I thought you said at one point that there was 8,000 bedrooms or something in the palace. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't remember how many bedrooms there were in it, but this thing, I mean, if you've ever gone to like Rhode Island, where was that, Providence? No, it's not Providence. I can't remember what the heck it is, but they have like the Vanderbilt mansion and
Yeah.
stuff. Dude, it is like that, but you take 5, 6 of those things, mush them together, and he had hundreds of these palaces throughout Iraq, and they are ornate. Everything is marble, gold lined, hand carved. I mean, all that oil for food money that we were sending him,
Yeah.
he spent it really well on very, very nice stuff. Like think of the nicest 5-star resort that you can go to. That was every one of Saddam Hussein's palaces.
Incredible. And you said within that palace, they now have that segregated into various departments of the government, and within that, smaller cells of things. Talk about that a little bit.
Oh geez, it's like an onion. So you had the green zone that was a big base. And then within the green zone, you had smaller bases. Those were all cordoned off. So military, let's say the 101st had one base, the 82nd, whatever it is, all had their own little base. And then you had the palace. And within the palace, you had the CIA had a part, and the NSA, and Department of Homeland Security, and the Army, and the you name it. Like it was just there was no real coordination. It's like everybody went in there and staked their claim, made their little village, and then would come out to the chow hall and then go back to their little village. It's almost like, working in corporate America where, you go to the third floor, that's where your people are. You don't know anybody from the first or the fifth. But it was just one of those places, like it was so beautiful you couldn't stop looking at it. But if you looked at it too long, you would run into like a barrier where somebody was like, only authorized personnel are allowed here.
Once you got settled in and you're kind of over the culture shock, because there was a couple of things you mentioned in here that blew my mind, but talk about a regular day in the life for you at that job.
Oh, I call it the combat mullet, right? It's business in the front and party in the back. So wake up, you go eat some food, you figure out what your mission is. We get a mission, let's say we're going to the Ministry of Oil. You load up all your kit, toss it in a Suburban or a Humvee, whatever team I was on at the time. You drive out there and just run roughshod over the people of Iraq, right? Every car in your way could be a vehicle IED, right? A car bomb. And everything on the road could be an IED that's going to blow you up. So you drive as fast and as violently as you can. You get your principal to wherever they're going to meet. You sit around and talk. And there's a lot of just conversations in the book because, war is actually really, really boring 99% of the time, punctuated with 1% of adrenaline. So you sit there and you have these just outlandish conversations. And then the principal says, hey, I'm ready to go. And you do the same thing getting back to the green zone. After that, you grab some dinner, you go work out, and then it's off to Saddam's immaculate pool just to go get absolutely wasted. Because military members can't drink, but as private security contractors, we could drink whatever we wanted. And the green zone had whatever you wanted. It was amazing.
So where was all that coming? The booze that you could get, because you talk a lot about drinking in the book, and I would have been right there with you. But where was all that coming from? Because you said some of the beer's really poor. It's been in the sun. Who's bringing it? Are American importers bringing that in? Who's getting it to you guys?
No, so for a while you could get Coors Light at the airport, and then they gave the airport over to Muqtada al-Sadr,
Yeah.
and he got rid of all the booze that was coming in. So it was all coming in through Europe. And it was like Carlsberg and Heineken. You could get Coronas, but it was all, I have no idea. They were probably bringing it in from, who knows, Iran or Jordan, you name it. But it was abundant. There was not a street corner you couldn't go on in the green zone and not find beer or steroids or you name it. You could have found it.
Wow. Because what we would see over here in the States was just how, I'm sure it was bad, but over here it looked like it was really bad, but somehow we were liberating them. I was very skeptical of this from day one. And another thing, I'm just going to riff for a second, tell you straight up, man. Like a lot of times it seems like the guys who did not go to war, they're the ones who most want to have it. And so there would be some of these people wanting to send young Americans over there to do all of this. And we went over there under very dubious claims to begin with. And then you talk about at one point in the book, you're talking about, I don't know if we lost, but we certainly didn't win. I begrudge no one who fought in it, but I was not down with the reasons that we went.
Yeah, and I wish I was that smart going into it, right? 2003, when I went in for the ground offensive, I was all gung-ho. But you're trained literally from high school. You're trained to go and wage war. You want to do your job. It's like being an electrician and then you don't actually get to wire up any houses. So it was awesome that I got to go to experience war. But then as I went over there and I got a really unique view, right? I had the junior enlisted view, I had the Army officer view, and I had the State Department view. I realized after time, we just didn't coordinate with anything, and we tried to wage these wars from a base, right? You can't win a war if you're sitting on this big secure compound and then you go out, mess stuff up and then you come back in. You're almost going out and like fighting and retreating. And that's all we did all day, every day. So we definitely did not win over there. And I would actually say, looking back now and probably in 20 years, people are going to look at the Middle East and they're going to say, you know, the one stabilizing factor of the Middle East was Saddam Hussein. And the US went in there and kicked him out. Now, Saddam Hussein was a butthole. I'm not sitting here saying like I'm a fanboy of Saddam. But at the end of the day, he kept Iraq in check. He kept Iran in check. He fought them for 8 years, 1980 to 88. He kept the Saudi Arabians in check. So the Sunni, the Shia rift that you're seeing happening in the Middle East right now, it wasn't happening because Saddam Hussein was in the middle of it. And we went in there and just, we're like, we know better. Here, have some democracy. It tastes delicious. And they don't want it.
This isn't complicated. Everything you just said makes sense. And I'm with you. I mean, nobody's saying that Saddam was a good guy, but some things just are the way they are. We'll proceed onwards because your job, the Blackwater job, was to protect these diplomats. So you have one amusing story. You think that, I guess some of the guys skip off to go to a Kid Rock concert, and then a couple of days later or something, you think that you're going to protect Michael Bolton, the singer from the 80s, but it's not really Michael Bolton.
Yeah, so the USO tour was always coming through, but they only went to like the really big bases,
Yeah.
right? So they didn't come hang out at the Green Zone. They stayed at like Camp Liberty right off of the airport. So you would have Kid Rock and Charlie Daniels was there. So I'm told, hey, I'm gonna go and protect Michael Bolton. And I was like, that is awesome. Like, who doesn't love a nice saxophone solo? Like, let's roll, right? So we fly in on those little birds, the helicopters. If you've ever seen the YouTube video Blackwater, you have those cool helicopters. Fly into that. I drop in, and this kid looks over at me. He's like a PFC in the Army, and he goes, hey, how's the hunting? And I am hung over. And I got a beard, I got long hair. And I was like, dude, I'm just here to protect Michael Bolton. And he's like, yeah, I know, but like, how's the hunting? Thinking that I was like this super duper special operations guy. And I was like, whatever, dude, the hunting's great. So I asked him for a Gatorade. He gives me one. And he's like, hey, there's Charlie Daniels. So me and my team got to walk over there, say hi to Charlie Daniels, God rest his soul. And then we go to pick up Michael Bolton, and it's John Bolton. I don't even know who this guy is. He's just got this big, huge mustache. I mean, turns out that he's just a massive warmonger.
Pretty
I would
much.
find out later.
The
But
walrus.
yeah, the walrus. So we drive him around literally probably the safest place in Iraq for 5, 6 hours. They give us this little hut that used to be on Saddam's palace grounds right next to the zoo where they had like the tigers and stuff, and there's flies everywhere. Like we were the help. They tossed us in there. I think I had like 8,000 mosquito bites after that. And then the next day we drive him around a little bit more. He jumps on this big plane, and as we're walking through, or as we're like standing in line, he walks through our line and like shakes our hands, which was actually pretty cool. Because a lot of the diplomats were sitting there like we were the help. We were the knuckle draggers that were just there to make sure that they weren't going to die. And this guy actually thanked us. And that actually felt pretty neat. If I wasn't standing behind the jet stream, soaking in hydrocarbons, and I probably am going to have cancer in a few years because of it, I would have really enjoyed that moment.
Well, listen, I'm not a fan of John Bolton, but that's the least you can do is give these men acknowledgement, shake their hands for protecting you. So I will give him that.
We'll give him that one. A
Yeah.
lot of the diplomats would come in and be like, there's my suitcase. And we'd be like, dude, yeah, that's you. Like, do you really want me to hold your suitcase and try to shoot at somebody with my no free hands? Come on. So
Well, let me ask you this. So, okay, so you guys are making a lot more money than the regular military guys. What is the atmosphere between Blackwater and regular Army and military?
it was a love-hate, right? Every military member would say, oh, I want to go work for you guys. And I would say, hey, here's my email address. If you want, you get back, like hit me up and I'll, be able to grease the skids for you. Nobody ever did that
Hmm.
because when you get home, you're still getting the same paycheck and you still have the same health insurance. You have all those benefits. As a Blackwater guy, you get paid a shoot ton of money. I don't know if I can cuss, but you get
You
paid a
can't.
crap ton of money. And when you get home, there's nothing. There's no medical, there's no VA, there's usually no wife. You've already lost her. There's no house. It's just you with your mind, right? So the brass military, the officers hated our guts because we didn't coordinate with them. We didn't care. I was openly disrespectful to military officers because why the hell wouldn't I be? I was a butthole. But a lot of the rank and file military members were like, that's what I want to do. That's my next career progression. And then they get home and be like, I don't want to go back that bad. So
Hmm.
it really went, it, there was some disdain from the brass for sure. And there's some disdain from, the military convoys that don't know you're out there and you're driving up on them or they're driving up on you. You guys are both armed to the teeth, like it's a Mexican standoff.
Hmm.
But by and large, they just kind of tolerated us.
Sure.
And there was some jealousy, I'll be honest, because I went back to Iraq as a O2, and I was like, man, I miss those days where I could just hop in my car, drive somewhere, go get food somewhere else. Like there's a little bit of jealousy there. I'm not that cool, but I was definitely cooler.
There's several things that surprised me about your book, and I didn't know a, a lot about Blackwater, but I knew enough that I didn't have a positive feeling about it. And I think at one point you even say in the book, you said, listen, if you've heard of us, you probably don't like us. And that's okay because we worked hard to get that reputation. But yeah, if I'm in the military, I'm not making as much money as you guys, and you guys get to sit by the pool and drink, and I don't. Yeah, I might have been a little bummed about that.
Well, not only that, but like, every video you see on YouTube is like Blackwater did this, Blackwater did that. Look, there were over 100 private military companies over there doing the
Right.
same thing that Blackwater was doing to some degree. Blackwater had the coolest logo, they had the best marketing, right? Everybody says, "Oh, I remember Blackwater. I shot at you guys once." And I was like, "Well, you didn't shoot at me because like that, well, A, I would have been scared to death, and B, you're a terrible shot."
Mm.
So it really comes down to like, yeah, I think they're frustrated about how we are able to act and react and move.
Blackwater was somewhat known, in, at least in the pop culture and news world, as being associated with various controversies. But Blackwater is not the first private military contractor. So just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, PMCs have been around forever. They just absolutely have. They really exploded after Iraq. And the reason is we went into Iraq and we didn't want to be seen as occupiers. So we gave sovereignty to Iraq over to the interim government. And once you do that, you have to be in Iraq at the behest of the government. So how do you get your diplomats around? Well, you have to use private military contractors because if you put a uniform out there, they're going to say, "Oh, these guys are still occupying us." And it really was insane that they got rid of the entire Bath Party. Now everybody hears like they got rid of the Bath Party, got rid of the military, but they also got rid of anybody that had ever actually run a government function. So these people had to be trained on how to create a schedule, use Excel documentation, like how do you pick up trash? How do you land airplanes? All these things that you kind of take for granted on a daily basis. These people had to learn with the new government. So that's where PMCs had to come in. And I mean, I think if we had to do it over again, we'd probably say, hey, look, we probably don't care if we're occupiers or not. Let's actually have some people moving these individuals around that'll coordinate. But I mean, we just didn't coordinate with anybody. We didn't care. We could jump in our vehicle and go to that Kid Rock concert, or we could drive to a better chow hall if we wanted to. Now you got to risk your life to do it, but we're just insane enough to actually be able to drive over there and get some Burger King.
But Morgan, you guys weren't the only people who weren't coordinating, because the way you're describing it, basically, we took everything apart and then had to put it back together in real time under the gun, no pun intended. Like, there's a lot of places that could go wrong. And in hindsight, I would hope that this wouldn't be the way we did it the next time. But that brings us to current conflicts that we're not officially in, but we're watching from the sidelines while we fund them, like Ukraine. And it makes you think, well, wait a minute. At what point are we really trying to win, or are we just prolonging conflicts? I don't want to be that cynical, but it makes you feel like we're not particularly organized in the way that we're doing this.
Well, look, military units don't coordinate with each other very well, right? Everybody wants to be the person that says, "I did that" when something good happens, and say, "Holy crap, that wasn't me" when something bad happens. Same with corporate America, right? Somebody doesn't make their quarterly earnings, like you don't want to be that guy. So it became a territorial thing in Iraq, and the same thing is kind of happening in, oh geez, let me just name them off. Syria, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Haiti, the US-Mexico border. We have private military contractors down there working in some capacity. And the reason is because you don't want to put boots on the ground as an American politician. You just don't want to. Nobody wants another war. So instead of going and sending soldiers to train these people or to move kids across the US-Mexico border or to teach people how to use different weapon system, you send over contractors.
Right.
Now, here's the problem with that is that you're still putting American boots on the ground. It doesn't
Right.
look as bad, but the same thing happened in Vietnam, right? We started with advisors and then we slowly started adding and adding and adding. The same thing is happening now. And if one of those Americans dies, here's the good and the bad thing. If one of them dies, it's probably not going to drag us into a war. The same way that if a soldier dies, it's going to drag us into a war, right? Oh, those are just the PMCs. Those guys kind of deserved it. They were over there for the money. Totally get where we're coming from and why politicians use us. The problem is if it gets so bad, like Fallujah 2004, it will affect our war policy.
Mm-hmm.
After Fallujah 2004, we sent the Marines in to take Fallujah because the Blackwater guys died and we didn't want the next Black Hawk Down to happen. Good Marines had to go into Fallujah. Some of them lost their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were maimed because you have non-combat civilians in an active combat zone. And I think that's the slippery slope that we continue to keep pushing and pushing on these other powers, but saying, oh, it's not really us. Well, it is. You're just using PMCs instead of soldiers.
The end of Blackwater in Iraq, I believe, was 2007, but immediately those contracts got turned over to another company. So did they then just sign you up under that name?
Yeah, so I was gone.
Yeah, that's right. You were already
Yeah.
gone, but the rest of the
But
people that were there.
yeah, so what happened is contracts would change pretty regularly. So when I was up in Kirkuk, that was run by a Department of Defense contract, and it became a Department of State contract. So when Department of State came in, Blackwater said, hey, you guys are all under the State Department now. Do you want to keep a job or do you want to be sent home? Everybody kept their job. Same thing when Blackwater left. Triple Canopy got the contract, walked into the 500-man camp in Baghdad and said, hey, you guys are all Triple Canopy people now. Congratulations. So same people, exact same mission, but hey, it doesn't say Blackwater now. It says Triple Canopy, and that makes everybody feel a little bit better.
So you just mentioned all of those various countries, Syria, Ukraine, even the US border, and Haiti. So we have people, we have private military contractors in all those areas right now.
Oh, yes, 100%.
And what are they doing exactly, do you think?
Man, that's the million-dollar question. So there's really kind of two types of contracts. One is, do we have intelligence apparatus in that area? Nobody knew that we had private military contractors in Benghazi, but we had State Department people in Benghazi, we had CIA, so we have private military contractors.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the contracts that's always going on. Iraq still has private military contractors moving around, diplomats at the embassy. The other one, this is the new one, is that private military contractors are being used at the US-Mexico border to move illegal immigrants into the United States and then handing them off to nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when something bad happens, who is going to take the blame for that? Is it the guy on the ground that forgot to check a block? Is it the contractor itself? This contract is under MVM, Mike Victor Mike. Is it the Department of Homeland Security that says, oh yeah, we had those people that were doing that? Or are they all going to sit there and blame each other? And that's the beauty and the folly of being a private military contractor. You get paid more, but the liability, if that kid goes from the US-Mexico border, let's say to Tennessee, and gets sold into sex trafficking, you're going to be the one that takes the blame because Department of Homeland Security is not going to raise their hand and say, oh yeah, that was us. We did that contract.
So Morgan, I just need to understand this because the border is another one of my big pet issues that bugs the heck out of me. So you're saying that we have private military contractors helping people cross our borders, and then we hand them off to NGOs, or I'm sorry, or these various groups. Why are we doing that?
The question of the year right there. So they're not helping them get across the border, but once they
Okay.
cross the border,
Okay.
they
Okay.
are then facilitating their movement. So there's
Okay.
two reasons. One is that Department of Homeland Security does not have the manpower to do it. That's probably your biggest reason. Two, you don't want to put ICE agents in a plane with a bunch of kids and have them be able to, have a reporter run up on them and it's an ICE agent and they have to be able to identify themselves. You can look this up online. MVM, Mike Victor Mike, they're literally chartering planes down at, let's say, El Paso, Texas, Tucson,
Hmm.
Arizona. They're taking these family units and these unaccompanied minors, they're putting them on planes. You're not tracking charters. You don't have to go through security. And then they got these, big, rugged guys that are over there escorting them. And people have confronted them and said, "Who do you work for? What do you do?" And they just flip their badge around and they don't say anything. So it just gives that opportunity for the government to say, "Are we really doing that?" Yes, you are, but you're just having somebody else do it for you.
A couple of years ago, I'm from the West Texas area, and there's a town of about 125,000 people in my neck of the woods. It's called Abilene, Texas. It has a small airfield there. And then lo and behold, it was 2 or 3 years ago, about this time of year, a couple of articles came out and said, hey, guess what? There's some planes flying into the Abilene Taylor County Airport, and they've got all these immigrants on them. And it was very hush hush. I don't remember what ended up coming of that. I don't think really anything. I think maybe once it hit the press, then they started flying into another small airport. But that just blew my mind.
It's insane because who is the one that is actually regulating these people? Who's the one that's saying, "Hey, you have, let's say Morgan is over there. He's an unaccompanied minor. You took Morgan from point A to point B." Who are the people that are actually identifying that these migrants coming across are the people they say they are without
Right.
documentation, without anything else? So what it allows the government to do is essentially kind of turn a blind
Mm-hmm.
eye to it. And then if something bad happens, same thing that they did with Blackwater. They say, "Oh, it's that bad Blackwater. Oh, it's the bad apples that did this." But you're paying these bad apples to be there. Like I mean, from a political standpoint, it is absolutely like it's amazing. It's great for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, look, I thought PMCs were going to die after Iraq and Afghanistan. Where do you need a bunch of like knuckle draggers carrying guns and full body armor? It has only gotten bigger and
Yeah.
bigger and bigger as the government has realized I don't have to train these people. I don't have to pay them. I don't have to give them medical coverage. I don't have to give them benefits, retirement, none of that stuff. I can just throw cash at this thing and then hope it works out for the best.
That is one of the things that I've learned from reading your book. I had a bit of a negative opinion of things like Blackwater, but at the same time, I've got a bit of a negative opinion of the current state of the military in general because it's become super woke. And I'm not particularly secure with the fact if these people even know what they're doing. And if the shit hits a fan, they're going to be able to do anything. So in that case, I almost want more private military contractors because at least those guys have in the field experience and are kind of up to the gig.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that. Now, here's the problem is that there is no regulation as a civilian in a foreign land, as a contractor for a government agency that really regulates private military contractors, right? If I'm Morgan and I go to Paris and I get in trouble, the laws of Paris in France are going to apply to me.
Yeah.
If I'm Morgan and I go to Iraq, but I'm working for the Blackwater that's working for State Department that has a contract, what laws apply to me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not the UCMJ, that's military. You could say it's the US law, but the problem with the US law is that you have a little thing called due process, where you have to have the ability to say what's the chain of custody and what happened at this crime scene to say Morgan did or did not do what he was supposed to. You can't actually do that effectively in a combat zone. So when people ask me what should I do, I'm thinking about going into private military contracting. I say, get a liability policy, get a $5 million liability policy, because if something bad happens, the government has all of your money that it's willing to spend to prosecute you.
When we were first talking about you being on the show, I had some ideas in my mind, and you also sent a couple of things to talk about that I was like, actually, I want to ask you about that, which brings us to what's going on in Gaza. So, what kind of private military contractors do we have in Gaza right now? And what about that crazy pier slash barge that, what was that, $235 million or something? And it's already completely fallen apart?
Yeah, so we've always had contractors in Israel because we have a very robust intelligence community there.
Mm-hmm.
So you have contract anywhere where you have intel, you have contractors that are protecting them. Those were the good gigs, man. If you could get on one of those, you never left because you got to live in the city, you got to go party, you didn't have to wear all your kit all the time. So they've always been there. And now what you have is this administration is saying, well, I'm going to go put a dock. I'm going to spend $320 million on creating this dock, but I'm not
Even
going to
more,
put,
even $100 million more than my feeble mind remembered.
yeah. And he said, well, the first thing he said was no boots on the ground.
Yeah.
You can't get a supply container from the ocean onto a dock and into Gaza without having a human there. You have to have some kind of boots on the ground. That's private military contractors. Now, Israel started going into Rafah and the US started pushing back on it. And Israel said, hey, you know what we'll do? We're going to make a deal with you, United States, since you're supposedly in this fight. The the crossing between Rafah and Egypt, we're not going to hold that. We're actually going to use a US private military contractor to run that gate. To which Hamas said, hey, how come we don't have a vote in this? This is kind of our war. And quickly went out and said, look, anybody that's here that's foreign, we're going to treat them as foreigners and we're going to fight them. So you're putting US boots on the ground as private military contractors to try to placate Israel and Egypt and not giving Hamas a vote. Like it's absolutely insane that this is the best solution. But,
Mm-hmm.
if you put boots on the ground, what's going to happen? You're going to get voted out of office.
Let me ask you this. What did you think of the Afghan pullout? I supported us leaving Afghanistan, but I thought if we're going to do that, we do it in a reasonable way. And then I was flabbergasted by the Afghanistan pullout, the way it went down.
Mike, if you're ever having a bad day, just sit back and realize that somebody spent trillions of dollars and years in Afghanistan just to give it right back to the Taliban that we took it from.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll say, maybe I'm not doing so bad. Like there's dumber people out there than me. Afghanistan was lip service to everything that we were told as soldiers in the military, right? You don't leave a fallen comrade. We're going over there to help. We're going to do democracy. Little girls are going to be able to go to school. All those reasons why not reasons why we went in. Let me start this over. So we went in to get rid of Al Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
We got rid of Al Qaeda, and then we said, well, the Taliban are shooting at us. We may as well shoot back. So now we had to get rid of the Taliban. And then we said, well, now they need democracy. Now little girls need to go to school. We kept adding these goalposts to this war so that we never knew what winning looked like. We did the same thing in Iraq. So nobody had any idea, like, if we meet this benchmark, we're done. We won. Let's get the heck out of here. So when we left, we literally had intelligence units saying, we know the Taliban is on the move. They're coming to Kabul. And our political figures said, yeah, don't stop them. Think of how insane that is. The media is saying the Taliban is on the march. They know it's coming. And the political figures are saying, don't stop those guys. Let them keep coming. And then when they tried to pull out of Kabul, they're wondering why the Taliban didn't come in and secure Kabul for them, let everybody get on planes and leave. Well, we've been fighting these guys for 20 freaking years. It was absolutely, if you went and tried to figure out the worst way you can leave somewhere, aside from going in and taking a dump on somebody's kitchen table,
Mm-hmm.
that's it right there. Go in there, guns a-blazing, and then leave with your tail tucked. It was absolutely like shameful what they did.
It makes me really upset even just thinking about it. But then now we've got the Ukraine situation, and talk about the private military contractors in Ukraine. What do you think they're what's going on with all that?
So they first started these contracts. Well, first off, it is like the greatest business plan that you can ever think of. We give money to Ukrainians. Ukrainians use that money to bring over weapons. And then they bring over private military contractors to train their people with our money. Look, if I was Zelensky, hey man, like you can't lose. You can't
Right.
lose at this.
Right.
So they bring in private military contractors that are training basic infantry tactics: shoot, move, and communicate. Here's how you use weapons. Here's what you can and can't do, how you should do it. The problem is that it just slowly keeps creeping forward. It used to be, hey, here's how you fire mortars and artillery rounds. And now it's trainers training people on how to become soldiers. And they're slowly getting closer and closer to the front lines to where something bad is going to happen. You're either going to have a rocket that comes in from Russia that kills some private military contractors. Something bad is going to happen. Those guys are going to die, and they're just essentially fodder for politicians so that they can say, I didn't have boots on the ground.
All right. What about Taiwan?
Ah, man, Taiwan. I love Taiwan.
I'm sure,
So,
but give me the lowdown.
so Taiwan is really, really unique because China has always been saying they want to take Taiwan, but they've never
Yep.
really had the opportunity. And I
Right.
know Taiwan has a gun culture, so maybe China's not going to take it to a
Do
certain
they?
extent.
I didn't know that part.
China can take Taiwan whenever they want,
Yeah.
right? They did the
Yeah.
same thing with Hong Kong, right? They essentially annexed Hong Kong. 2 weeks everybody bitched about it, and then everybody stopped caring. Probably the same thing is going to happen in Taiwan. Now, why do I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later? Taiwan, TMCS, is that the name of it? They do semiconductors.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
Taiwan
they're
Semiconductor.
yeah, so they're moving to Arizona. They have a huge semiconductor plant that's coming in here. Look, if you're China and you already want to take Taiwan, and they're making most of the semiconductors used by the world, why are you going to let them create essentially a completely other place for their supply chain when China wants to control the semiconductors?
Mm-hmm.
So right now is the perfect time. You got Biden that's not going to do anything.
Right.
We're not going to go to another war to fight for a pseudo country that doesn't really exist, or else we would be in Gaza. And look, if the longer you wait, the more infrastructure they're going to have over here to where they can build their own semiconductors. I think it's ripe for the picking.
Well, I think you're right. And another one that comes to mind. So this thing that happened in Niger, didn't we have some military troops stranded in Niger just recently, and we had to bail on another mega $1 million base that we created
Oh
just a couple of weeks
yeah.
ago?
Yeah, so Niger essentially kicked us out. They said, "Hey, thanks for all the money.
Yeah.
We appreciate it, but we're going to align with Russia." So Russia right now has China, they got North Korea, they're starting to get into Africa. They have some
Mhm.
stuff in South America. Those countries can create their own world economy
Mhm.
completely absent of the US dollar to where our sanctions aren't going to even matter. So it's really easy, right? So we give Ukraine weapons, China gives weapons to Russia, and then Russia pays them and says, "Hey, and we got natural gas. We'll give you some of that natural gas." Like they're they're pretty self-sufficient, and these little things where we say we're going to do sanctions are not going to deter them from actually going to war.
Well, Morgan, I have to say, your book was very surprising to me in that it gives an insight into people who do something that you might not have been able to see yourself do. And the last thing I want to talk about is you talk about the people that came back that actually they miss the adventure, and then some of them really don't ever come back.
Yeah, so war is toxic, but it is intoxicating.
Yep.
Like, there is a part of me at 43 years old that thinks, man, I'd love to go over there and get some more war on. Now, I've got a family, a couple kids. Like, I'm not going back, but there's a lot of people that leave. And when you leave as a PMC, you leave by yourself, right? Contrast that to the US military. You deploy as a unit, you come back as a unit, all your buddies are with you, you can decompress, you can train, you can do whatever you need to. When you come back as a private military contractor, there's none of that. And there's no VA to reach out to, right? So this is why contracting is cheaper. You don't have to have a veterans affairs because contractors don't get any of those benefits. You don't have the ongoing costs of war that you see with military members. So a lot of people came home and could not figure out where they fit into society. And there's been a number that have committed suicide that I knew personally this was 20 years ago, and they're still struggling to figure out what's my place in this big US society. And some of them just take the final out. And it's pretty sad, right? I mean, Eric Prince is fine with, he made his money, Constellus is making their money in VM, but nobody's looking at the long-term repercussions for these people that are doing a tough job in a tough environment that is going to have the same effects as being a soldier over there. And I think that's the shame of it.
You have kept your head pretty clear on all this. How do you do it? You've seen things that I will never see.
Yeah, I don't personalize stuff. A lot of people personalize stuff like they shot at me or, they blew me up. Look, you're just a target of opportunity over there. And I think the people that get out and are able to kind of move on realize that. Like it's not personal. I didn't know the guys I shot at. They didn't know who I was. So I don't personalize this stuff. Now there's still some scars of war that I have, but I've also said, like, look, at the World War II generation can come back and fix air conditioners. By God, I can get my sorry ass up in the morning and I can go to work, in an air conditioned office.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just difficult for military members, private military contractors to distance themselves and not feel like somebody was targeting them. If I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just doesn't make, I don't know.
Well, it makes sense to me. And the other thing that's unusual about this, you've humanized the experience for me from reading your book in a way that I did not anticipate. And another thing that's interesting to me is like you said, war is intoxicating. And there is that I feel from the book, and I understand it, that's when you're with these people and every day is a rush. And then you just, then you're no longer
I
experiencing that day-to-day adrenaline rush. It's kind of a downer.
Yeah, well, and somebody washed my laundry and made my food, and I knew where my bed was every night. Like it was a really simple life, except for the whole thing, like you might have a rocket land and blow you up and die. So
Mhm.
it really, like all the crap that you have to deal with, or I have to deal with on a regular basis living in the US, like going and buying laundry detergent. You don't even have to deal with any of that stuff. It's just you and it's big boy rules. And it's amazing. But at the same time, if you're on the bad end of that mortar that comes in, then you might die. So
Morgan, it's been a really interesting experience reading this book. I enjoyed the book. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Guns, Girls, and Greed. I was a Blackwater mercenary in Iraq. The author is Morgan Lerette. Morgan, thank you for coming on the show. Tell everybody how they find you. And I'm sure they can buy the book on Amazon, but all of your social media, where can people find you?
yeah, track it down on Amazon. Jay Moore, the comedian, actually read the audiobook, did a great job on it. So if you guys don't want to read, get the audio. Check me out on Instagram. It's at Blackwater Dude and the number one at Blackwater Dude one. And it's the same for on X and TikTok and you name it. So if you have any questions or you are a PMC prior, please reach out because I love to help those that were private military contractors because we're pretty much like a little lost generation of people that think, oh, those guys, they existed. Yeah, we're still here.